Hello everyone, Lore Master of Sotek here, bringing you my first recorded battle from the Curse of the Vampire Coast, which of course I have to bring Lizardmen. This DLC might not technically be about them, but if I didn't bring Lizardmen on my first battle, I think I would be violating a personal contract that I didn't sign. In any event, let's do a quick rundown of the armies. I'm up here against my good friend Dov Plays, so without further ado, let's jump into it. He's got 3 units of Fellbats here who are already moving out to patrol the skies and cause issues. He's got a Deathshriek Terrorgeist, and he's got Luther Harkon on his own Deathshriek Terrorgeist, which I love the Deathshriek Terrorgeist. It's like covered in seaweed and has barnacles up on its head. It definitely looks like it died at sea and they just sort of drudged it up. Then he's got, for his other commander, he's got a Vampire Fleet Captain with the Lore of Vampires, with Invocation of the Heck, Dance Macabre, and then he's got his ability Taunt, and he's got the Power Stone, which Taunt is a very, very nice debuff that you can see here. Very, very devastating, especially since most of the Vampire Count Generals have this really nasty ability called Hornswoggle. And they have, so they're very similar. Hornswoggle is a little bit better, but they can be used together because they don't count as the same ability. So you have to watch out for people who are going to be stacking those. Luther also has Power Siphon, which adds a 15-second recharge to all your abilities, lowers your vigor. He's got Magical Void, which gives himself and all allies within range 33% magic resistance. He's got Slongold, which will basically stop a character from regenerating any winds of magic for an entire minute. And then he's got All Hands Ahoy, which is a pretty substantial leadership buff. On top of that, he's got 5 units of zombie deckhands with polearms. He's got 2 units of zombie gunnery mobs with handguns. And then he's got 2 units of probably my personal favorite unit in the roster, the deck droppers with handguns. They are so powerful and so fun, and I just noticed that their bats seem to have a kind of a pot belly going on there. As for my army, pretty standard. And what I'm finding to be somewhat effective against the Vampire Coast, this definitely is not an easy matchup for the Lizardmen. But I've got 2 units of Chameleon Skinks as my vanguard, relying mostly on their improved combat stats, their poison in both range and melee, and their 360 skirmish, while also having missile resistance, to basically allow me to go toe-to-toe with the Vampire Coast, as I'll be able to trade fairly efficiently with them in shooting engagements due to that high missile resistance. Then on the flanks, I've got 2 units of Skinks, which are just cheap, fast infantry to muck things up. 2 units of Swords Warriors with shields that are capable of going toe-to-toe with pretty much anything except for the Depth Guard. And then you have Temple Guard with no chevrons anywhere. And then I've got a Skink Priest of Heavens who has Wind Blast, Curse of the Midnight Wind, Roiling Skies, Harmonic Convergence, and the Cube of Darkness, which also significantly reduces enemy winds of magic. Then I've got 2 units of Kroq-Gars who have had a notable buff in this patch. Their damage and some other stats of theirs got improved. And then I have 2 units of Cold One Riders, which all of the Cold Ones now have Rampage, but they also got a much better stat line to compensate for it. And I actually really like them now. Like, I never really took them before this patch, but in this patch I genuinely do. And then I've got Kroq-Gar over here on a Cold One. I would take him on Grimlock, but unfortunately Luther Harkon will just tear him apart. And then finally, I've got 2 vanguarding units of Pterodons that were hiding in these trees, which they're not technically skirmish units, which is nice because that means when they come out of the forest, my enemy doesn't get a big display that's like, an enemy unit has been sighted. Like, if he's not paying attention to his mini-bamp back here, then he's just not going to see them. In any event, the early parts of the engagement have begun. The Fellbats have kind of tried to cause some delays on the battlefield, but my Kroq-Gars and Chameleon Skinks with their poison are going to make very short work of these guys, even though Harkon's gun, as you can see, is doing a ton of damage to these Kroq-Gars. He's got 614 weapon strength with his pistol, and it just freaking hurts. To make matters worse, it has this new trait called Disrupted, which adds a 50% chance to miscast and lowers your physical resistance by 10. Meanwhile, over here, you can see that my Pterodons did get into his deck droppers with handguns, causing them a delay and doing about 50% of their health in melee damage, which is pretty surprising. They're terrible fighters, which is like their only good weakness. But unfortunately, they get absolutely torn apart by the handguns, which is okay with me, because honestly, he keeps firing way too long after they've shattered, and it allows all of my infantry to approach without taking damage. Here, I've met him across the line while my Pterodons continue pursuing the deck droppers, who instead of splitting up, kind of keep running together, which is a bit of a mistake. It would have been better to split them up so half could go and shoot me and half could run away, but all of his ranged units are getting into me now. However, across the battle line, I do sneak all of my Cold One Riders around the back, and you can see here, this unit runs into the back of these zombie deckhands. You can see here, Luther comes in with Hornswoggle and just wails on Kroq-Gar, getting in 2 melee hits and just doing a ton of damage. I do manage to pop the Sacred Spawning of Zodal and the Swiftness of Itzel to give me a speed buff to counteract Hornswoggle, and I am just running for my life at this point because the charge animation on the Terrorgeist makes it very swift. My Chameleon Skinks are starting to try and rally to the front line while the Pterodons are continuing to tear into the deck droppers, and this unit is almost completely down. Across the battle line, my infantry are absolutely kicking the crap out of his infantry, and you see here I used Cold-Blooded to ensure that this Cold One Rider unit cannot rampage for quite a long time, and it gets into this zombie pirate gunnery mob and starts taking them offline. The first unit of deck droppers has completely disintegrated and collapsed to the earth, but unfortunately these Pterodons do break as they get focused on by the remaining shooting units. Here my Kroq-Gars have all started to rampage and are kind of just doing what they do best, running from place to place. I do get off a... I am doing some pretty substantial damage here to this Vampire Fleet Captain with the Temple Guard, and of course that Hand of the Gods comes in and does another healthy chunk of damage. Her leadership is all the way gone now, and she's starting to crumble, and she will completely disintegrate after Kroq-Gar runs in here, whacks on her with the Revered Spear of Tlunxla for a few hits, and she is gone, which means the Vampire Coast magic is offline. The Pterodons do come back and are swooping in to hopefully get back on harassing these deck gunners, making sure they stay offline. Here, Luther comes in diving very aggressively towards Kroq-Gar, but I do manage to surround him with Temple Guard, Saurus, and the Skink Priest, who, between casts of various debuffs, especially Slongold, is trying to get off magic, but man, it is really hard to have consistent magic against Luther Harkon. In the meantime, my Cold One Cavalry have pretty much finished tearing up the back line. My Chameleon Skinks are entering the fray, and they're going to just start pouring poison attacks into these Death Shriek Terrorgeists, both Luther and the regular one. They do have regeneration, so unfortunately the poison isn't really going to be able to effectively kill them, but it will reduce their stats and hopefully give others the ability to do so. As you can see here, these Pterodons, there were only 4 of them, and there were many more deck gunners, but once again, they do tear them apart, and the Terrorgeist has to get involved to provide them a little bit of relief and end that battle. The Terrorgeist does try and swoop in to do some damage to the Skink Priest, but being on foot, all he really does is punt him a pretty good distance away, and the Skink Priest quickly makes his hasty exit. Here, all the poison and all of the Kroq-Gars, Cold One Riders, Temple Guard, and Saurus are starting to wail on Harkon. I try to bring back Kroq-Gar, really hoping I can get some good mileage out of him here at the end as a leadership figure, if nothing else. But these handgunners are starting to fire into him and just doing little bits of damage each tick at a time. And I'm hoping just to stay away from Luther, but unfortunately he's going to train his pistol on me. And you'll see that every time he fires it, it does like at least 100 damage. Not to mention it's going to lower my physical resistance by 10% every time it hits me, which if you don't have any physical resistance means you just get -10. He does a really nasty scream here that kills a ton of the Cold One Riders, rips off about 10% of their health, and causes them to immediately rampage. And the deck droppers, along with Luther Harkon, unfortunately, unceremoniously shoot Kroq-Gar in the head, and he goes down. However, the rest, all of the zombie infantry, because Dov really didn't have any solid infantry, all he had were zombies, they're all dead now. So at this point, he has to keep something on the ground, otherwise his army will disintegrate. That doesn't necessarily mean he's out of the running, though, by any means, as these Terrorgeists are very mobile, and they're very nasty, and they cause terror. So he's functionally going to be able to essentially cycle charge me if he's careful about it, which means that I need to spread out my army to minimize the effectiveness of these cycle charges, and do what I can to surround the Terrorgeist so I can hit it from multiple angles, lowering its melee defense, because if you're being hit, I think from the sides, your melee defense is lowered by 50%, while if you're hit in the back, your melee defense is lowered by 75%, if I remember my rules correctly. My Skink Priest does get a little bit too close to the action here, and I think he gets chomped here in a second, or maybe Harkon starts shooting him. Another Scream comes in. This one doesn't seem to connect quite as well. I do loop the Temple Guard around and pop Harmonic Convergence on them, so they have an incredible stat line, and I bring them in, trying to do my best to kill the Death Shriek Terrorgeists, while the Chameleon Skinks are just laying into them with poison. I do fire a couple shots into the deck droppers, but I figure at this point it's better to just keep applying poison to the Terrorgeist, reducing down their stat line, and trying to just get them off the field. We have got this one to start crumbling, and we do keep pressuring him heavily with Kroq-Gars, because the Saurus are quite frankly too slow to keep up. The Chameleon Priest did break after Harkon kind of nom-dominant a bit, but he's okay, and although he broke due to Terror, he'll be back later. Which we're actually going to see how powerful of a mechanic Terror is here. Because while, like, see, this unit of Saurus here has 64 of its models left and probably about 55 to 60% of its health, you'll notice that just because they're exhausted and fighting a terrifying unit, as soon as this charge comes in, they're going to break due to Terror. Which is pretty spooky to think about, because if there was a nice big terror bomb that hit all of my army at once, then my entire army could have effectively just ran, and if that would have happened, they would have shattered. However, I do manage to knock him into full army losses, doing enough damage to Luther, Harkon, and his Terrorgeist, and that is the end of the battle. So just going quickly here over the post-battle screen, Kroq-Gar only got 11 kills. You just really can't take him on a mount against the Vampire Coast, unfortunately. I really like Kroq-Gar on a mount. It's very thematic and fun, but he just gets dumpstered every single time. It's much better to take him on foot, especially if Luther Harkon's in the mix, because Luther is just a much better duelist than Kroq-Gar is, unfortunately. Because since he's a flying model, he gets to decide the engagement. He can just shoot you the entire time with harassing bullets that lower your physical resistance. And that Terrorgeist with its poison and very, very high weapon strength is just a horrible opponent to go up against. The Skink Priest obviously didn't get any kills, which is good. He wasn't supposed to be in the fight, though he did take quite a bit of damage, but he was just providing buff spells the entire time. You can tell the Skink cohort and the two zombie units that fought each other, because both of them got quite a large amount of kills, but no chevrons or anything to show for it. The Saurus did extremely well. 80 kills on this one, 68 and a chevron on this one, that they likely got from fighting the Terrorgeist and tearing apart the zombies with very good ease. The only thing that the Vampire Coast has that will hold back Saurus reliably is pretty much Rotting Prometheans and, of course, the Depth Guard. The Temple Guard got 90 kills and earned themselves 3 chevrons, which is just crazy. And that's just from them hacking away at the Vampire Fleet Captain, Luther Harkon, and the Terrorgeist. These guys are worth their weight in gold against the Vampire Coast, and they are so strong against pretty much everything it has to offer. Especially since they come with shields, unlike most halberd infantry, which is really nice for reducing the damage they're going to be taking from all those all that missile fire. The Chameleon Skinks didn't really take any damage, performed their job very, very well. Between the two of them, they got about 60 kills, and more importantly, though, they were just constantly harassing the enemy large units with poison, slowing them down, allowing me to more easily keep up with them to do damage as they tried to flee, and of course just being an overall nuisance. The Cold One Riders pretty much wiped out all of the back line of the zombie pirate gunnery mobs, in addition to getting some nice rear charges on the polearms, granting me complete control over the ground battle. The Kroq-Gars, I actually am finding these guys incredibly useful against armies that tend to want to hold still or just meet up in battle lines like the Warriors of Chaos or Vampire Counts or the Vampire Coast. As with their improved stat line, they're pretty capable of just slamming into the front line and pushing through it due to their incredible weight. Especially if you get a skink unit to absorb the initial charge, the Kroq-Gars will plow right through them, keeping up their charge bonus and be able to do a ton of damage without receiving much in return. And having a 15% missile resistance against the Vampire Coast does not hurt either. Finally, the Pterodon Riders. This one did its job killing 5 of the deck droppers and causing their leadership to plummet pretty hard before they got absolutely shredded by all these guns. But the other unit managed to fill in for them, getting 20 kills against the remaining deck droppers, fully murdering this one and tearing this one down nearly to death. The Pterodon Riders are an excellent take against the Vampire Coast. The only tricky thing is you have to protect them against the guns, because as you saw, if they get crossfired like that between 2 units, they will literally die and shatter in a matter of seconds. For Dov's army, you can tell which units fought the Skinks as they got a fair number of kills. But the ones that had support, like this unit here with the 27 kills, I believe these ones were up against the more wounded Saurus because they had support from the Terrorgeist, who earned a chevron, and boy did he earn it. This guy was everywhere important he needed to be, causing a huge ruckus. Luther Harkon is, of course, incredibly terrifying and is one of the strongest duelist characters in the game right now, and absolutely gunked up Kroq-Gar and was just being an absolute nightmare to my army. The Vampire Fleet Captain unfortunately got engaged in a pretty unfavorable matchup against the Kroq-Gars and the Temple Guard, so she just got torn apart. And then when Kroq-Gar hit her with the Hand of the Gods and jumped in himself, she just couldn't take it anymore and disintegrated, which meant Dov lost his magic a lot earlier than he wanted to because all that healing was gone. The last thing was the Felbats actually did pretty well on kills, considering they sort of just dived right into my Chameleon Skinks. I think if Dov had noticed the Pterodons, these guys would have been incredibly useful, because they could have just flown back and gone into my Pterodons, and Pterodons will lose that matchup against Felbats pretty much every time. Honestly, I think if you're going to bring deck droppers, having 1 or 2 units of Felbats is almost a staple, just because it can tie up enemy flyers long enough for like Luther or Noctilus or whoever to take them down. But in any event, I hope you guys enjoyed this battle. I've got a lot more to come, and of course we'll be doing tons of live streaming and stuff, and I hope you all have a great day, and I'll be seeing you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.